When you're fed up with fighting food and your body, join us here. I'm Allie Shapiro, creator of the Truce with Food program and your host for Insatiable, where we explore the hidden aspects of fighting our food, our weight, and our bodies, and dive deep into nutrition science and true whole health. Fair warning, this is not your parents' health care. This is a big rebel yell to those who crave meaning, hunger for truth, and whose lust for life is truly insatiable. Believe me, freedom awaits. Welcome to Insatiable Season 10, research-based weight loss. Rebuild your biology and psychological feedback loop. Have you ever read about the past and thought, I can't believe people actually believe that? In the 19th century, doctors thought that bloodletting could cure illnesses, and Dr. Joseph Lister was shunned for his thesis and early research proving that bacteria cause disease. While Dr. Lister was being denigrated, Charles Darwin was being celebrated, falsely claiming that women were less intelligent than men. In Darwin's time, women rarely went to advanced schooling. They needed to preserve their limited energy for baby making. Yeah, that was a thing. The 20th century wasn't immune from junk science and outrageous claims. Domino's Sugar advertised a sugar diet as a way to lose weight, touting that it had less calories per gram than fat. Cigarettes were also marketed as healthy. It sounds laughable to most of us now, but only because brave, curious thinkers were willing to question, test, and disprove the status quo in limited thinking. In Season 10 of Insatiable, research-based weight loss, rebuild your biology and psychological feedback loop, we'll explore emerging research and viewpoints, now on the periphery, that will make the current mainstream thinking of weight loss as willpower and calorie cutting look just as misguided as soothing babies and colds with morphine syrup, which, yes, was a medically endorsed thing in the Victorian era. We will explore how taking the steps towards weight loss individually and societally can be a form of resistance against the toxicity and industrialization of our food supply. We'll question the convenience of telling women that weight loss is giving in to the patriarchy and male gaze, and how this silences deeper questioning about why we all have gained so much weight and what other consequences come with this physically and mentally. We will do this by taking an integrated and holistic look at the biological and psychological feedback loop that goes into maintaining a natural weight and how our industrialized society has disrupted it. We will discuss how what you eat informs how you feel and your habits, which in turn influence what you eat as a constantly self-reinforcing infinity loop. We'll examine how culture and thus education and medical systems are not holistic and results in a siloed view of human biology and health, which allows the public and experts to continue to frame weight loss as about willpower and only about food, and how very convenient this is for those who set and profit from our industrialized agriculture policy. We laugh about Domino's Sugar diet, but the same reasoning still informs our modern dietary guidelines. Even the mainstream is noting that the Sugar Research Foundation, with the help of 3 handsomely compensated Harvard scientists in 1967, handpicked studies placing the blame on fat rather than sugar for heart disease. In 1977, one of these researchers would become the head of nutrition for the USDA and outline nutrition guidelines, enabling the low-fat weight loss craze to become a thing, and we'd all get fatter, sicker, and more depressed in the years to come. If in your gut you feel there are more important and potentially revolutionary root causes to your weight battle, or if you want to learn the viewpoint that people will likely have 50 years from now, that willpower and a simple view of calorie counting as the key to weight loss makes about as much sense as giving morphine to babies, this season is for you. Welcome, everybody, to Season 10, Episode 3 of Insatiable, Food Freedom Number 2, Feel in Control, Not Controlled by Food. So I'm scrolling through my Instagram feed and I see that intuitive eating meme about should I eat the cookie, where there's a straight line to yes, eat the cookie and move on. And I get overwhelmed trying to weigh those voices with the fact that I often truly do feel crappy after eating certain foods. I get that the intuitive eating people aren't trying to make me eat, quote, bad foods. They are trying to help me not have emotionally loaded foods. But it's hard to know if it's the shame of eating or if it's truly not feeling good in my body, you know? This was a question I got from one of my clients as she was embarking on my self-study, Why Am I Eating This Now process. I loved her insight that there is a nuanced difference between feeling shame from eating a cookie and then actually feeling physically crappy from food. Of course, the goal of intuitive eating is that by legalizing all foods, you eventually don't binge on said cookies, chips, or whatever foods are hard for you to eat just one of and can then hear your body's natural cues. A main intuitive eating theory is that binging is often because of restriction, and overeating and binging will go down the less you restrict. This is all true. And I've found that there are two main root causes that intuitive eating leaves out that make it hard for us to hear our natural intuition around food and thus feel out of control. And those root causes are: one, the foods we overeat or binge on are designed to hijack our physiological design and disrupt our natural intuitive eating cues, which are more subtle than the extremes of blood sugar highs and lows, felt as anxiety and hangry, that processed foods create. So just eat the cookie turns into I just ate the bag, and we feel physically tired but wired, irritable, and what clients often describe as junky inside. And I know that feeling as well, because that used to be what happened to me when I was struggling with food. The second root cause is binging and overeating aren't only about restriction. They are also about our story that creates patterns and behaviors that make us feel out of control or restricted in freedom in an area of our life that we then turn to food. For example, for some of my clients, it's their relationships with their partner, where they are tired of having the same fights, or it's feeling they have to choose between work and being healthy. This is where a cookie isn't just a cookie. When a cookie isn't just a cookie, the shame from eating is because we are chronically eating out of alignment from our goals, and we believe we are broken in some way because we are out of alignment with our values or who we want to be. But we are turning to food when we feel out of control in our story, not because we can't eat just one cookie. An easy example of the holistic nature of why we turn to food is people will often overeat if they skip the gym and feel guilty or they are now behind with their calories. They think the day is ruined, so F it, I'll start tomorrow, right? Either their story is active in how they exercised, or they missed working out because something outside their control, like a sick kid or it's a busy time at work, prevented them from having the energy or time to exercise. The shame spiral from our eating is the same spiral we feel when we are out of control in other areas of our lives. So how do we untangle this infinity loop that our out of control eating is partly fueled by the addictive nature of processed foods like bread and peanut M&Ms? Because let's be real, no one is overeating steamed broccoli or steamed chicken breast. And sometimes being bad, quote, is from emotionally feeling out of control elsewhere in our lives, more consciously known as chuck it, F it, or I'll get back on track after the holidays, after my travel is over, etc. It's artificially dividing our lives between on track and off track. So that's what we will explore today. In today's episode, we will discuss how intuitive eating is a great start, yet doesn't go far enough in helping us feel in control of food, the difference between control and choice, and how choice gets you further with your health and nutrition goals, and how to choose to align with your physiological and psychological feedback loop. First, we need to understand that what feels like being in control around food is actually about having choice. Being in choice enables us to feel more empowered in our lives because we can work with what's unfolded versus trying to do the impossible, control everything. People often think eating disorders and disordered eating is about control. Because I don't work with people who have an active eating disorder like anorexia, I can't speak to those situations. But for those of us with disordered eating, which I define as any eating that is out of alignment with our goals, this could be binging, overeating at night when you don't want to be, feeling out of control around food is actually about being out of choice. Being out of choice happens from physical and emotional imbalances. Now let's take two examples. It's your birthday and you want birthday cake, but you are worried one day of eating of cake will lead to a week until it's out of your house. You think, I'm on a good streak, I can't have that cake in my house, so I'll tell people I don't want cake and serve fruit with keto whipped cream. On the surface, it looks like a good choice, or maybe in your mind you think healthy choice, and you're in control. But actually, you're out of choice and thus feel deprived because you really want the birthday cake. Mine is favorite with cookie. I always ask for a gluten-free cookie cake with buttercream icing. So anyways, you don't get the cake though, right? Because you think you're being good, but you're deprived because you really want the cake. And so deprivation eventually leads to overeating or binging. Or you eat the cookie even though you know they make you feel like shit, like my client's example. It can look like the good legalizing food choice, yet it's out of alignment of your goals because you don't want to feel crappy. Hence the shame spiral of why am I doing this to myself? In both situations, being out of choice feels like being out of control. As I replied to my client's email, I will never tell anyone to just eat the cookie. Rather, I'll ask, do you want the cookie? Do you know if you really want the cookie? Do you know how to x-ray the cookie to recognize when it's not just a cookie? If you want the cookie, great, eat it. If you aren't clear, let's look at those mental gymnastics over, I shouldn't, but I want to, or I don't want to, but I can't not. As a symptom, you're feeling out of choice in your story. Many clients say simply knowing the difference between control and choice is helpful. As an overall definition, I think of control as an external process where we are trying to get our bodies and the world to bend to our will. We also feel at the mercy of life, and in this space, life is happening to us. This includes relying on external ideas of good and bad foods to follow a certain diet plan for weight loss, even though the drastic calorie counting means we will eventually, quote, fall off because it's out of alignment with our physiological design, which doesn't support drastic calorie counting. It can be trying to prove our point to our sister so she understands us. It can be trying to do a good job so we can keep our job. Whatever it is, we are trying to influence an external outcome, how we look physically and to others. And control isn't always bad. In fact, my clients have had great success with control in their lives. That's why they try to use the structure of diets or an even more compassionate framework like intuitive eating. Having a structure in their life, whether it was schooling or a certain career path, enabled them to succeed, right? When we know the rules, we can follow them and get the gold stars. Yet when we try to exert control on things that are more dynamic and thus uncontrollable, like our body's physiological design, other people, the mystery of life, we often fail. As we say in the coaching world, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. In other words, we try to apply the same idea of a, quote, formula for success onto something that needs a more fluid navigation system. Feeling in control of food is about the internal process of two choices. What do I want to choose based on my physiological design and owning my story? Choice is an internal process of really getting to know our bodies and our emotional needs and wants. When we have a framework to figure this out, which is what my work is about, we discover, quote, being good and being bad with food, and our story gets radically revised. That's why my tagline is radical truth for every body. It's both our physical bodies, our emotional bodies, our political bodies. When you really get clear on what works for you, so fun. It's like a ripcord, just ripples. I love it. So the question becomes, what foods work best for their bodies so they can choose health, which is feeling good, not an intellectualized idea of good. This is different from a weight loss focus. It's not about the high of being good or thinking we are good if we are pushing through hunger or cravings, for example. It's quite the opposite. It's choosing what feels satisfying. Now, of course, copious amounts of refined carbs aren't good for anyone, but they are the solution, not the problem, when we feel out of control in our story. If we extend the satisfaction metaphor, because how we eat is always telling a story, what do we need to choose to satisfy our needs and wants? And this question is more matrixy than you might think. Because when we are in our story, we are trying to minimize risk. And so we believe we need and want things we actually don't care about. It's exactly like what happens in Western medicine. It's great for stopping the bleeding, things not getting worse, which is what we assume in our story. But if we want to be well, we have to ask different questions and orient in a different direction towards life and vitality, which is all the feels. And it's riskier, right? When you ask yourself what you want versus what you should or have to do, you get drastically different answers. So let's first start with choosing how to eat based on our physiological design, based on my client's dilemma of should I eat the cookie and feeling like physical crap. We went over in great detail a lot about our nervous system design and how our body's blood sugar works in episode 1 of this season. If you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend it because it will make this episode make a lot more sense if you're really into the science. Now, what most people don't realize is that each time we eat, we are choosing to align with our physiological design or not. This isn't something we can argue with. Food is medicine, okay? It doesn't mean eating well is guaranteed to prevent cancer or completely resolve your arthritis. And it does mean food will influence how you feel day to day, from how you sleep to your moods and energy. I'm reading a great book on baby and children's health by Dr. Aviva Ram, who is also a trained midwife and herbalist. She brings up how Western medicine, with its over-reliance on doctors and pills, make us think health happens to us, versus health is cultivated by our choices to support our bodies. As a result, we think the medicine is fixing our body versus with natural medicine, you are supporting the body to do what it's capable of. You are choosing to cultivate health. This so resonated with me because when I was depressed, had IBS and acne, I never questioned taking antibiotics, Accutane, antacids, or all the antidepressants I tried. I was looking for some magic pill to happen to me, just like I thought skinny would be magic. I had no idea I even had other choices because of this unknowing consciousness. And this again was 20 years ago when functional medicine, all this other kind of stuff wasn't in the collective consciousness. Dr. Ram even says we should change informed consent in medicine to informed choice because consent implies we will consent to what the doctor says when really we should challenge and partner with our doctors. I love another doctor telling us this, right? Some real street cred. And I think she was trained at Yale. Often the Ivy League is trying to train us and to keep the existing system up, but there's some real dissenters in there. And she is one of them. This learning how to learn skill is not something we are taught in school. Many of my close friends who are considered super educated in a traditional sense are unaware they are even making healthcare choices. They just trust what the doctor recommends. They are choosing to trust the doctor's answers, and that is okay. And you have my full permission to question the doctor too, or find another one. That is a choice. Speaking of Ivy Leagues, my best friend from childhood recently visited me. Hi, Kelly, if you're listening. I love her. She's brilliant. She went to Harvard to get her MBA. And when I was telling her all the choices I made in my labor and births, she said to me, wow, you really thought about a lot of things. And it didn't occur to me that I was thinking about all these things and other people weren't. And so now I can say, hell yes, I did. It dawned on me after she left that without my own truce with food, I wouldn't have known I could question things like taking penicillin for the B strep I was tested positive for, or that I didn't want them to take my baby away right after birth and wanted the umbilical cord to pulse for as long as it needed because of how that really helps store iron for the baby for the first 6 months. So many people think that what is normal with our food and healthcare is what's best. So if you take nothing else away from this episode, know you are always choosing and that there are always other choices. So when it comes to food to feel good, the key is we have to unlearn our external ideas of good and bad foods based on calories or macros and reorient to what feels good and bad, specifically with our mood, energy, and focus. This can be challenging because our intuitive eating, our ability to know how foods work in our body, have in part been disrupted by highly palatable, addictive processed foods. In this next week's edition, or I should say January 21st edition of Well-Rounded, I'm citing a study that shows how processed foods are really a huge driver of our obesity epidemic. It's not just overeating. It's what's in processed foods, and it's also how it overrides our inability to feel full. So this is researched and it's kind of common sense as well, right? If we really start to unpack this. As packaged food becomes big business, companies realized in economic terms, hunger was an inelastic demand. In other words, people can only eat so much. This isn't going to grow your profits every quarter, right? So how do you make something like hunger elastic or increase the demand for food? You disrupt the body's natural feedback loop with processed foods. So processed foods are dangerous for two reasons. They contain excess refined carbohydrates, and this is not just high fructose corn syrup, which people are pretty aware of. It's other things and unhealthy fats. This combination puts us on blood sugar highs and lows, making us feel anxious only to crash and hungrier. And again, I've been saying this for 13 years now, and I'll probably be saying it for the next 13. Blood sugar control is not only for diabetics, okay? All of us have blood sugar highs and lows. With diabetes type 2, it's just they're chronically high often, okay? But we all need to understand our blood sugar. The smells of these foods are also highly engineered. I had a friend who used to help with these smells, but quit in part because it felt so unethical to her to be controlling people's biochemistry this way, because smell triggers our appetite too. Now, I don't think, or I like to not think, the CEOs of Kraft or Coca-Cola are all vacationing together and thinking, 10 more people will be diagnosed with diabetes, and that's why we got this bonus and can afford this vacation and boarding school. But I do think they want to know how they can increase revenue and cut costs and increase market share. And the result is processed foods with cheap carbs and fats. So whether it's Starbucks pumpkin spice latte or a gluten-free bun with a chicken sandwich and fries, these foods will make you hungrier than when you first ate them. So it's physically impossible to just eat the cookie and move on. What's also tricky here is that many of us think we are eating, quote, real food or healthy food when it's processed enough to disrupt our bodies. I'm talking about egg whites, vegan butter spread, 2% yogurt, and even healthy, quote, green drinks that are mostly fruit and no fiber disrupt our biofeedback loop. Yes, many of the, quote, health foods we believe are good are bad for our biochemistry. And if you do a quick Google search, you will see all the big food companies now own most of the, quote, health food companies. So they are going to be applying the same profit motive and profit formula, right? Reduce quality, basically. Increase shelf life, which is so you have less loss, more chemicals, etc. Or, for example, Horizon Dairy with their, quote, happy cow, which is now owned by Dean Foods / White Wave, has been and is under incredible scrutiny because of their liberal definition of organic and grass-fed. You might not think it's a big deal, but when you know that grass-fed dairy has more CLA, which is short for conjugated linoleic acid, which is a healthy fat, and will feel more satisfying because of this. And again, CLA is so influential in our health that it's one of the top selling weight loss supplements because CLA has been shown in studies to help fat burning, right? And grass-fed animals have more CLA. So I share this minor nutrition detail because the more we get away from foods in their natural state, even from how animals are fed, we are going to be hungry and depressed, let alone the environmental impact. One of the easiest ways to align with our physiological design is to feel good in choosing whole foods over processed foods. In doing this, we are choosing to better stabilize our blood sugar and gut health by the absence of refined carbs and fat. I like to start with blood sugar because you can get quick wins, or what I like to call the quick fixes. Plus, blood sugar control makes or breaks your physical cravings, which is why one cookie turns into as many as it takes to make you feel, quote, junky and not clean. Here's a classic client example of unconsciously choosing processed foods to destabilize your blood sugar. The bread basket went out to dinner. You arrive at dinner slightly hungry, which signals your blood sugar is on the decline. This feels like really craving the bread, which even at fancy restaurants is often highly processed. But you're not choosing the bread, you're choosing to get on your blood sugar roller coaster too. And this is why one piece turns into a couple. Your meal with some real nutrition comes and can help stabilize you. You may feel quite full from the volume of bread and not the nutrition, and you're now craving more carbs to stabilize the roller coaster. Either way, you don't need as much of the protein and fat that will help get you off this roller coaster. And then it's dessert time, and we all know we have a dessert stomach. I know I do. So you eat the dessert and keep the roller coaster going. So you felt out of control after one piece of bread, yet you were unaware you were choosing to destabilize your blood sugar. Instead, you think, I just love bread and too much. What I find happens, as was with me, I didn't know I had other choices because I believed in my ideas of good and bad so much, including what a whole food even was, even though most of them weren't even food. For example, I used to eat quick oats for breakfast, which much of the nutrition is removed, which is why they cook so quickly. In theory, I thought that's healthy, right? But quick oats are really processed. And then get a salad at my work's cafeteria. I didn't realize the dressing I was using was full of industrial seed oils and sugar, and the soup had more chemicals than ingredients. I'd crash by 3 p.m. looking for whatever was in the office, like cookies or leftover breakfast bagels, which are more processed foods. Even the whole wheat ones. Not so whole wheat. This was before I even knew I was allergic to wheat. But anyways, and then for dinner, I'd eat veggie patties with some sauce I picked up at Whole Foods, and I thought I was healthy. But most of the sauces at Whole Foods had tons of sugar and was made from soybean oil. I'd of course be craving something sweet afterwards. And if it was an okay day, I'd have just a few high protein cookies if I was being good. Yet the protein was soy protein isolate. Again, highly processed and it's very estrogen, messes with the estrogen in women's bodies. Soy protein isolate does. My blood sugar was essentially never stable. And so I never knew how I could eat a cookie or a piece of birthday cake in a blood sugar balancing, stabilizing way. We have a physiological design that we can't control, yet we can choose to align with it. The more you learn what whole foods work best for your body, the more you understand that each meal is a choice to balance your blood sugar or not. And in this process, we often discover a nuance of when we can eat bad foods, quote, bad foods, and they don't make us feel like shit. Mainly, they don't destabilize our blood sugar enough so we can eat just a cookie or one piece of pizza, enjoy it, and be done with it, just like the just eat the cookie meme says. You don't need to eat whole, real foods 100% of the time to still get the benefits from whole foods. I want to emphasize that because we have a lot of overachievers here or when we're struggling with food, we think in black and white terms. So I don't want people to think I'm saying you have to eat whole foods 100% of the time. You'll actually find your body is amazing resilient and can do amazing things with when you eat whole foods about 80% of the time. For example, sometimes you just don't care that you're quote unquote making the bad choice. As long as it's your choice, you will enjoy it more and feel less guilt. For example, I don't do well with a lot of dairy, but I've learned my body enough to know the nuance of how much I can tolerate. Sometimes I'm willing to take the hit. Like right now, I'm still coming out of the fourth trimester with Essa, and I am drinking coffee. I know how to drink just enough coffee so that it doesn't make me crave carbs later on in the day. And I add heavy whipping cream to my coffee. I love it. So I used to think I was being good with skim milk, but then came to learn that is highly processed and has more sugar in it. And anyways, I like heavy whipping cream a lot more, and I feel much more satiated from it. But if I feel my immunity is starting to take a dive, like I'm getting a scratchy throat or I get too many pimples, I back off because I don't want to get sick and I don't like zits. So all of this is to genuinely support me, not shame me at this point in my journey. But I figured that out. My tolerance for whole dairy is on a continuum. It's not all or nothing. And sometimes I am choosing to eat it, and it does not affect my health in a way that is going to slow me down. So again, that's why I should say that we don't have to be 100%. As I started being willing to unlearn my ideas of good and bad foods and eat aligned for my physiological design, my choices compounded. I was able to reverse my depression, anxiety, acne, and IBS with food as my main medicine. I also had, with the depression and IBS and anxiety, had to do a lot of emotional work, which we'll get to in a second. But that was my story work. But I certainly didn't start out that way because I didn't even know I had the natural way as a choice. I grew up in a house that, yes, we like natural stuff, but it was like more in the form of supplements, or we did whole rolled oats. We went to this health food store in the mall. This was when health food stores smelled like B vitamins. This was before Whole Foods. So I had an idea of health, but my dad especially is very into conventional medicine. And I used all of that growing up. So this was shocking to me that I was able to be more powerful than the medicines I had tried and didn't work for me. So the more you choose, the more choices you discover you have. This happens to a lot of my clients, and it's one of my favorite parts of our work together. They wake up inside the matrix and fight like hell to get out. And I will say fighting like hell does not mean willpower and grunting at the gym. It means trusting that our bodies want to feel good. It's trusting rest. It's trusting pleasure. It's the opposite of deprivation and willpower. I had one client who was put on birth control in her teens to mask a bunch of symptoms the doctors couldn't explain. She told me I was the first person to ask why she was put on birth control. I helped her connect some of her symptoms and weight gain to the pill, but she got curious and went down some deep rabbit holes herself and eventually chose to get off the pill. We then worked at the root causes of why she was put on the pill in the first place. In addition to changing her diet, she owned her story so she could be consistent enough to clear up many of the root causes. Her skin got better and she lost weight from getting off the birth control pill and cleared up the root causes. And she's had so many other health experiences along the way that she is able to better navigate and be in choice to avoid over-treatment, even during an emergency visit. And she continues to heal and get healthier. With her food, we didn't do many drastic changes, but we started getting off packaged foods. When we do this, our ideas of good and bad foods change. We learn egg whites and canola oil butter spread aren't whole foods. We can start to taste the difference between grass-fed and regular dairy. We realize our healthy store-bought naked green smoothie is full of sugar and no fiber. And even if it's sugar from fruits and vegetables, it's not a whole food and makes us hungrier. And we also discover Naked, with its supposedly hippie natural logo, is owned by PepsiCo. So to avoid feeling physically awful from, quote, bad foods, you have to choose to know how your blood sugar and gut health work so you can redefine good and bad foods, not from an intellectual and weight loss standpoint, but from an internal, immediate health perspective. And by health, I mean energy, focus, and moods. This is how you know if what you eat is aligning with your blood sugar. A few experiments to help you see how processed foods make you hungrier. First, eat a piece of bread with your main meal of whole foods instead of on an empty stomach, and see how the real food stabilizes needing multiple pieces of bread. Or, number 2, eat an appetizer like chips and salsa with chips and guacamole and salsa, and notice how the guac and salsa stabilize the processed chips. Or number 3, make a cookie from almond flour and a natural sweetener like maple syrup or honey instead of any off-the-shelf cookie. See if it's easier to portion control the more whole foods you have in the cookie. Then connect this to one quick fix metrics that matters to you. Is it decreased hungry? Is it decreased cravings? Is it a better mood? Is it energy, more energy? You pick what matters to you and connect each choice to that internal metric that is beyond external ideas of good and bad that are connected to weight loss. The more you do this over time, you will redefine good and bad foods more as aligned or unaligned choices and realize when and how you can have rich foods in moderation and when you want to choose that. And remember, processed foods aren't a category, but a continuum. If you start thinking like this, you'll be surprised at how your definition of healthy food changes. And you may get into layers and layers. Like for me, again, first it was just, whoa, what is a whole food? What is not? And now I'm really into the importance of diversity and how foods are grown beyond the organic label. But it took me a while to get there. We have to do what's stabilize ourselves and our pain, and then we can really move to what I call playing to win instead of trying not to lose, which is like trying not to gain weight versus trying to cultivate health, right? Very different directions. Before we get to the shame spiral of eating out of alignment with our goals, let's take a breath and a word from our sponsor. Do you want to get to the root cause of why you fight food and struggle with your weight? Do you want to figure out what foods work best for you and rewrite the story that causes you to fall off track with your eating? Do you want to feel in control of food with more freedom and fewer rules? If so, my annual flagship Truce with Food program is tailor-made for you. In this boutique, small group experience, you have the best of both worlds. My individualized attention and the accelerated learning curve that comes from growing and learning with others. So you can put yourself on a track to a sustainable, healthy weight for you. To learn more, including hearing client stories and why they consider this program life-saving and life-changing, visit alishapiro.com/truce with food. And for our 2020 group, use the coupon code EARLYBIRD to save $500 if you register by Monday, February 17th. Registration opens Monday, February 10th. Hope to see as many insatiable listeners there. Okay, now onto the shame spiral of eating out of alignment with our goals. Because most of us have struggled with food for so long, we feel shame because we believe we are wrong, right? That's the difference between shame and guilt. Guilt is, I did something wrong. Shame is, I am wrong. And if we are inherently wrong, we can't change and we must be broken. And what I'd like to suggest is not that you are wrong, but that you made a wrong choice for you elsewhere in your day. You chose something out of alignment with your emotional needs, and you made that wrong choice unconsciously because you didn't even know you were choosing. When we are in our story, the choices we are making are about minimizing risk, not necessarily choosing what we need or want. When we choose what we need and want, we are opening ourselves to risk. For example, have we chosen a job or even making choices within our career that are the safe route, or do we take risks? One of my clients was a badass corporate marketer. She still is, and she decided to take the risk to go to a startup that was more aligned with her interests and where she'd have more influence, right? It's so fun when we get to have our ideas rather than reacting to others. She said our work together helped her take that leap. Or some of my clients start asking for more money when they are up for new jobs and promotions rather than what was first offered, and they get it. When we play to win, we are aligning with what is true for us and the choices we can and want to live with. It requires taking radical responsibilities for our bodies and lives versus assuming someone else, even the experts, have our answers. Or, for example, many of my clients feel like they have to choose between their careers or being healthy. Or many people think they have to burn 300 calories each time they exercise to make it count, i.e. be good. If we use my clients' emails, thoughts about the intuitive eating meme above is that we don't often know what other choices we have because we're only focused on the cookie or pizza, not what's underneath the cookie or pizza. We don't know how to look at root causes. As I told my client, the why am I eating this now process she was about to embark on would help her answer, do you know when a cookie isn't just a cookie and how to move through that? My clients and I discovered that binging and overeating is from feeling frequently out of choice in our lives because of our story. For example, one client found herself binging after family gatherings. Through our work together, she realized her story was active in her relationship with her sister. She used to get really frustrated by her sister's meanness and neglect, even when she asked for her support. She knew intellectually that they were very different people, yet she felt like she was winning or in control when she'd get the reaction or response she wanted from her sister. That used to make her feel safe in her story because she perceived she wasn't being misunderstood. Her unconscious goal was not to be misunderstood, right? Minimizing risk. I don't want to be misunderstood. But through our Truths with Food work, she discovered what she really needed and wanted in this situation was to know she did her best to express how she felt and to stay in her truth. And she could choose that, which she found so freeing. And in choosing that, she was playing to win, trying to be in a real, authentic relationship with her sister, which doesn't have to mean they see eye to eye, but rather, do they truly see each other? Like health, relationships require cultivation and don't just happen to us. With my client who emailed me, she discovered in the Why Am I Eating This Now process that what she often wanted was belonging and not the cookie. As I said in episode 1, our story is about how we can belong to where we want to belong. But first, we need to belong to ourselves. And belonging is much deeper than connection. It's owning what we want or need, not what we think is, quote, good or bad. In our everyday way of thinking, it's I'm choosing this instead of what I believe I should or have to do. We got these ideas of good and bad, right or wrong, prepackaged from our families, medical system, and culture. They protected us. And let me say, we live in a patriarchal, racist, capitalistic culture, so these ideas of good and bad are not very healthy. And now we can choose if we want protection, what I think of as trying not to lose, or do we want to play to win? And also understanding that our needs and wants aren't in conflict with belonging and the safety of belonging where we most feel at home. Much like getting off prepackaged foods to become naturally intuitive eaters, we have to stop digesting prepackaged ideas of what we think we need and want, starting with thinking we love cookies so much. Not only do we stop eating the cookies, we become aware of the power we have and are more likely to be paradoxically in control of our lives. So for example, my recent birth experience, I have a history with hospitals. I still think it's weird that even it's normal to birth in a hospital where people are often very sick. But I got treated for cancer in a hospital, and I have a real fear of hospitals. And being in this field, the health integrative medicine field, I also have a real fear of overtreatment, which happens a lot in hospitals during birth. And I can give you an example. Even my treatment for cancer, they no longer do radiation for people who were at my stage of cancer. They found it actually doesn't really help in the long run. And now because of that overtreatment, which again, I understand we were all doing the best at our time. I mean, we were all making choices with the best information we had at our time, my doctors included. But now I have to be monitored for thyroid cancer and breast cancer. And so I just share that because this is why I'm very cautious of overtreatment in figuring out what that was. And overtreatment happens a lot in hospitals during birth. Birth is a very high risk business and experience. So I find that a lot of the choices that are made in a typical birth is more cover your ass medicine versus evidence-based. And again, I understand why. If a baby dies, it's one of the most heartbreaking things. So I'm not criticizing the system. I just wish we had, or the fact that birth is high risk. We can't change that. And I wish as a society, we just understood that it was high risk. Well, I'm not going to go into that. Maybe that's a different podcast episode. But again, none of this is done maliciously, right? None of the conventional choices are done maliciously. But just because many people in healthcare don't know that they aren't practicing evidence-based medicine, it doesn't mean I have to choose to go along with this. So anyways, I learned at 39.4 weeks that I risked out of being able to give birth in the midwife center, which was my original choice. And the midwife center here is a freestanding birth center. It's far away from the hospital. I mean, it's 2 miles because if you need to go to the hospital, they will take you there during birth. But it turns out I had a fibroid, and the fibroid grew very long, and it changed its position. It was embedded in my uterus now, not on the outside. And I developed a condition they call poly for short, which increased my risk of hemorrhage. And the midwife center wouldn't allow me to birth there for my own safety. I was devastated. I mean, I was crying uncontrollably, right? I mean, this is the truth of the matter. And if I hadn't healed my relationship to food, I would have eaten because I would have thought, this isn't what I want. And I would have felt as scared and angry and terrified that once again, my body let me down and that I was, quote, out of control. Right? I have to go to the hospital, and the story would have gone, I have to do everything that's there, because the truth is if you're in a hospital, as our doula said, you're buying the medical ticket. That's just what it is, right? I couldn't control that though. But because of my choice with food tools and all the empowerment I've witnessed in myself in the past 10 years using these tools, I knew it was most important that I felt in choice, not in control of what unfolded. So I knew how to strategize that my end goal and metrics along the way were an unmedicated, healthy birth for both myself and Essa, or based on how things unfolded, I wanted as little intervention as possible. And while the experience would be different, I could still be in choice about many things. And I was able to still be in choice for about 80% of my decisions. For example, I had to be induced, and I didn't want to because I assumed I had to be induced with Pitocin, which makes contractions even more intense. But I learned I could choose to be induced in a very low intervention way. So I didn't need Pitocin or medication. We did a Foley bulb, and the midwife broke my water, and then my body took over. And I got the unmedicated, empowered, and healthy birth I wanted, even though it was a different path to get there than I had originally planned. And I couldn't 100% control the midwife's policies or how my fibroid or how labor unfolded. And I could keep my eye on the milestone choices and long-term goals, so I felt my voice was heard in this process. I know myself so deeply now, and even though we all change, I know feeling heard and considered is what matters most to me, and it often matters to most of us. And while the great mystery helped my labor take off, I also did the work to be clear about my choices and feel confident in them. I remember I was ready to get into like some of the most intense part of labor, and the anesthesiologist came in and made me sign a form that if I wanted the epidural, it was, allowing them to put the epidural in. And of course I signed it. But if I wasn't confident in my choice, it'd have been really easy at that point to just say, oh, if you think I need it, let's do it, right? And apparently, me staying in choice and really advocating for myself, Carlos helped, our midwives helped. And I do want to give credit to the nurses at the hospital who really supported my choices. Apparently, this is so rare as our birth ended up becoming a case study and how to do a low intervention birth in a high-tech environment. And I was also really excited that the nursing student who supported us asked our midwife if she could intern with them because she loved being part of our birth and hadn't ever experienced a birth without an epidural. And so the key was knowing what I needed, wanted, and the choices I had, which many of us aren't aware of in our story because we are focused on minimizing our risk instead of staying open to what we most deeply want. So I find a great area to start to experiment with and connect this holistic way of understanding our food choices is with exercise. So exercise role in weight loss and health has been largely distorted by big food companies like Mars and Coca-Cola. They shift the focus there as a way to distract from the role processed foods has had on obesity. Or even exercise companies. The 10,000 steps a day idea was started by a Japanese company, which started the trend in the mid-1960s with the launch of a pedometer called Manpo-K. And again, I don't speak Japanese, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, especially Kelly, my best friend who speaks Japanese. Maybe you could tell me how to pronounce it correctly. But this Japanese company, they started as a marketing campaign to sell this pedometer that 10,000 steps a day was the path to health. And then walking clubs popped up. And by the late 1990s, the 10,000 steps fitness routine swept America, becoming the unofficial standard for ensuring good health and fitness. So many of us have rigid ideas of what is good and bad exercise, what counts and doesn't count based on corporate interests. And I think we hate to admit that, right? I would hate to admit that, but I'm constantly unpacking ideas that aren't based in science. And often we are overeating in reaction to how we've exercised. Research shows people whose relationship to exercise is fueled by how they eat. In other words, trying to make up for the calories they've eaten, overestimate how much they burn during a workout and underestimate how much they eat. In other words, we want rewarded for the sacrifice of exercising. So to get out of our own exercise matrix, which is often where our story is also hiding out, we need to redefine what we want to get out of exercise, not just if it was a calorie burn. What exercise do we want to choose based on what role do we want exercise to have in our lives? This is something you have to choose to experiment with because even if we logically know exercise doesn't help with weight loss or Coca-Cola has influenced how we think about exercise, we will still remember that in our own life when we worked out religiously, we were thinner. Not that we had less stress, more time, we're sleeping better, and or we're generally more active because we lived in a city or we weren't sitting for 10 hours a day behind a desk with blue light. And that's the thing about our stories. We can't accurately see what's happening. We will trace everything back to the prepackaged narrative we've been following, whether we are conscious of it or not. But as you start to experiment and take real action and know how to connect with what you want to be doing to the outcomes you want, you'll be able to change. Many of my clients find they actually start to be more active, not less, once they find what works for them, or that their weight doesn't change even though they are now doing less of a calorie burn. And there's more freedom because they know how to tune into what they're feeling like that day or season in their life instead of being driven by shoulds or have tos. And this is especially important for women because our menstrual cycle will dictate how much energy we have. And again, some days we shouldn't be pushing ourselves, and there are times to do that. And if we're out of sync with our hormones and energy cycles, we're going to have more cravings, more stress, more weight gain. In my own life, what finally made me more consistent with exercise was realizing I needed to boost my moods. And in cases of extreme stress, release the physical nature of anxiety. It also boosts my creativity and my energy. In my own inquiry process to learn how I wanted exercise to work for me, I realized many times I would skip working out because I was tired. And the workouts I was choosing, like lots of cardio, would make me more tired. I truly didn't have energy for them, and they made me more exhausted, and then eat carbs for energy. I also discovered often when I thought I was tired, I was actually stagnant, and more movement would get my energy up. Not cardio, but say walking in nature or bar classes or even weight training. Regardless of what I felt like doing, I now had more choices to open up to me. So the key here is to become consciously in choice about what you need and want in the dynamic areas of your life that make you turn to food, when a cookie isn't just a cookie. This is where your story is most likely active and you're trying to minimize risk, to not gain weight or not feel guilty for skipping the workout or not feeling lazy, versus what do I want? What would feel good beyond prepackaged ideas of good that involve should and have to? These areas are dynamic, like in relationships or exercise, meaning the answers will change, but the more you learn your body and self, the more you can tune in easily and now how to get what you want and need. To start to experiment with this, next time in your life you hear yourself saying, I should, shouldn't, must, or have to, what Dr. Albert Ellis, a cognitive behavioral therapist, used to call masturbation. Next time you start doing that with I should, I shouldn't, have to do, or I have to do X, swap in, I'm going to choose X because it will be easier or more fulfilling for me, and see how it goes. You don't have to wait on your weight for more ease and fulfillment. You can choose to get started right now. All right, our conclusion. Prepackaged foods and ideas of what we think we want and need prevent us from being intuitive eaters. Processed foods and foods that contain processed carbohydrates and fats, especially as the main ingredient, will trigger your blood sugar and make it harder for you to hear what your body wants. Your story makes you turn to food and not really want the cookie. It's when a cookie isn't just a cookie. When we are eating out of alignment with our health goals, it's a sign our story is active and we are ignoring our emotional needs and wants. These emotional needs and wants are as important to your health as what you eat. In an area of your life where you feel stressed, think about what you truly want and need. What do you want to choose for a win-win rather than I should, have to, or must? Your needs and wants do not have to be in conflict with your ideas of success. To do this, you have to find the quick fix metrics that matter to you in an area of your life. For example, with exercise, what are the immediate benefits of moving your body versus focusing on an imaginary gold star for getting in 10,000 steps or burning 400 calories? What help your creativity? What rejuvenate your soul, increase your energy, connect with your people, right? This is why boutique fitness classes in part are so successful. It's a community aspect that we need. Think of what you need or want and then go make it happen. This is playing to win instead of trying to minimize the risk of falling behind or being bad. And looking bad shows up as fear of being difficult, people being mad, or being high maintenance, just as much as it does around our health. Sometimes you need a little space for the answers to come, but the goal is emotional fulfillment. If you're binging and overeating, restriction is a deeper metaphor your true self is trying to get you to see. Tune in next week where we will discuss how to end the binge restrict cycle, which includes black and white thinking, which is part of why we can't see all our choices. Thank you, Health Rebels, for tuning in today. Have a reaction, question, or want the transcript from today's episode? Find me at alishapiro.com. I'd love if you leave a review on Apple Podcast and tell your friends and family about Insatiable. It helps us grow our community and share a new way of approaching health and our bodies. Thanks for engaging in a different kind of conversation. And remember, always, your body truths are unique, profound, real, and liberating.